Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this conversation with André Leon Talley, the most influential man in fashion. I'm Sasha Pinto, the president of Fashion at Brown, which is the student organization hosting this talk. We are Brown's oldest incubator of style on campus with over 100 members in 10 departments ranging from fashion designers to editorial, business, and more. The highlight of our year, of course, is Brown Fashion Week every spring with our spectacular runway show and speaker series. But throughout the year, we also host wonderful talks like this one with influential leaders in the fashion industry. And today, we are especially honored to have André Leon Talley with us as our first speaker of the year, because André is one of the most remarkable cultural figures of 20th century America and an integral part of fashion history. André was the first, and for a very long time, the only Black man in the upper echelons of the fashion industry. His love for fashion cultivated at an early age by his elegant grandmother and his discovery of a Vogue magazine in a library in Durham, North Carolina, where he was raised in the segregated South of the 1950s. He graduated from North Carolina University with a degree in French literature and then won a scholarship to our own beloved Brown, where he earned a master's degree with the intent of teaching French literature. And while, thank goodness, those plans changed, André started his stratospheric ascent into the fashion industry in 1974 at the Metropolitan Museum of Art Costume Institute alongside the legendary Diana Vreeland, who became his friend and mentor. He later worked with Andy Warhol at Interview magazine, moved to Paris as the fashion editor and bureau chief for Women's Wear Daily, and in between, he held various positions at Vogue, culminating with a long tenure as creative director and the right hand to Vogue's iconic editor-in-chief, Anna Wintour. André has also been a friend, confidant, and advisor to virtually every leading fashion designer of our day, from Karl Lagerfeld to Oscar de la Renta, Halston, and Yves Saint Laurent, as well as to princesses and first ladies. In fact, it was André who introduced Michelle Obama to Jason Wu, who designed her first inaugural gown, which launched Wu's career. But perhaps the greatest tribute to André's influence on the industry has come from fashion designers themselves. Tom Ford declared that, quote, "André is one of the last great fashion editors who has an incredible sense of fashion history. He can see through everything you do to the original reference and predict what was on your inspiration board. When he sits in the front row, to know that he understands what you're saying, what you're trying to put into pop culture, well, that is what you work for as a fashion designer." And Marc Jacobs adds that there are not even a dozen people in the world like Talley with such incredible knowledge. But André doesn't stop there. He's also the author of numerous books, in addition to his recent memoir, The Chiffon Trenches, that created a firestorm when published in May and raised to number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. André has also been the subject of a fabulous documentary, The Gospel According to André, that he graciously brought to Brown a few years ago to screen, which is also when I had the great good fortune of getting to know him. And moreover, André is a pop icon too. He's been a judge on America's Next Top Model, he's appeared in his friend Mariah Carey's music video, and he oversaw Carrie Bradshaw's famous Vogue wedding shoot in the Sex and the City movie, making a pretty glorious cameo appearance on screen too. So suffice it to say, if this were a live audience, I know you'd all be on your feet applauding him by now. So won't you please join me in a virtual standing ovation to welcome our esteemed guest, Mr. André Leon Talley.
Hello.
Hello, André. How are you?
I'm so well, thank you. On this beautiful Sunday afternoon, I wanted to thank you for that extraordinary introduction.
Well,
are you a senior? Or junior?
I am a senior now.
Oh, let me just tell you, you've got a bright future in communications. I mean, people on television don't do talks. They can't. The way you introduced me was just sterling, smashing, touching, and wonderful, and exceptional.
You're making me blush, but thank you so much for joining us, André. I know you've had a hectic week between appearing on MSNBC the other night and being the first guest on Graydon Carter's new Airmail podcast.
Yes. I'm very excited. I had a very hectic week, but it was all worth it. I wrote my first column for Graydon Carter's Airmail,
Wow.
And did you see that? And then I went on the first podcast, and I am very happy about that.
I don't know how you do it all. You are amazing.
Well, I get my rest and I eat well, and I'm trying to stay focused in this pandemic.
No, that's so true. Absolutely.
I'm so impressed with your dorm room, with this extraordinary wall.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun decorating it, but
It's great. It's original, very original.
well, before we get too chatty, let me just tell everyone about our moderator for this afternoon, who is Sydney Taub from Brookhaven, New York. So Sydney is a junior here at Brown studying international and public affairs with an eye on law school in the future. She's a writer for the Brown Political Review, and at Fashion at Brown, Sydney writes for our editorial board and is also the head of FAB's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So with that, please join me in welcoming Sydney to the Zoom stage. Hello, Sydney.
Hey, Sasha. Hey, Andre. Thank you, Sasha, for such a wonderful introduction. Andre, I'm so excited to speak with you.
So excited to speak with you.
Now that we are all here and ready to get started, I just want to let our audience know that if anyone has a question for Andre, they can just write it in the chat box below, and we'll do our best to air as many questions as possible. And also, since I'm sure you will all want a copy of Andre's book, and let me tell you, it's a real page turner. The Brown Bookstore is offering 10% off for everyone, and you can find the bookstore link in the chat below. So with that, I will leave you two to get chatting, and I will catch everyone later. So bye for now.
Andre, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us today. How have you been spending your time in quarantine so far?
Well, Sydney, this has been the most valued time for the last 3 months. As it became warmer, I decorated my porch. I bought a card table. I bought fabrics. I bought tablecloths from John Darien. I had orchids put on the little pots, and I made myself a summer porch where I get every morning and try to read a book or read many books or read newspapers to be informed. So I found I've survived these moments of sheltering in or lockdown or safety by reading and reading and reading. You can never stop reading. And this is what Brown University is emblematic of. A student never stops reading and inquiring knowledge. I can so well remember I spent hours in those, what are they called, corrals? Corrals? Yes, corrals.
The library, yes.
Corrals, isolated, reading and reading and reading. I must say, at 71 years of age, I am very happy to have had that opportunity to be disciplined enough to read. Your best friends can be your books. I have never gotten through this summer. Now, in the moments when I am not reading on the porch, I might have friends up at 4 or 5 o'clock to have some iced tea. But there's no more than 2 people on the porch at a time, or 3, or at the max it was 4. Social distance, mask wearing, iced tea, a little bit of cold pasta al fresco, but reading everything. I've tried to read everything I could get my hands on from James Baldwin. He's so important for the world right now. What he said in the 60s is absolutely, it resonates today. He's a great writer. I have a personal librarian. His name is Garrett Rittenberg. He's also a painter, and he supplies me with all the books that I need to read. I've read so many wonderful books. I'm looking forward to reading the great, great book by John Meacham, who is a professor at Vanderbilt University, also an MSNBC contributor, presidential historian, Pulitzer Prize winner. He's just written a book on His Truth is Marching On by the late John Lewis, the civil rights icon. And that book I'm looking forward to reading. I have it, signed copy by him. Eddie Glaude Jr., head of the Princeton Department of African American Studies. James Ball will begin again. But I'm also looking forward to reading Melania and Me. My former colleague at Vogue, Stephanie Winston-Wolkoff, did the ultimate tell-all about her friendship and the cracking up of the friendship of Stephanie and the First Lady Melania Trump. I'm also reading the memoir of the Duchess of Chatsworth, Deborah Mitford. She passed away, and now her book has been reissued. I'm looking forward to, I read all things. I read magazine articles that come across. Everything. I want to read everything. And magazine articles as well. I'm so sorry. I took so long to answer that question.
No, I am so glad that you went into your love of reading. Reading in this time is so crucial to stay informed. And I myself have been spending a lot of time reading, and one of my recent favorites is your memoir, The Chiffon Trenches. So after its release in May earlier this year, it quickly became a New York Times bestseller. And in it, you explore your entrance and experience in the upper echelons of fashion through a very novel and raw lens. What prompted you to share your story in such an honest and vulnerable way?
Well, I became 71. Hopefully I'll be 72 on October the 15th. October the 16th, my God, I'm trying to push the date back, or the date forward. I was born on the same day as Marie Antoinette and Christopher Columbus. I thought at 71, I have to tell my story because it's important. After living for 7 decades, I've had a wonderful, remarkable life. I've met the most exceptional people. I've had a great education. I've gone through this world trying to represent my people, Black people, and my cultural knowledge in a way that would inspire others. And I thought, tell the story. I got this book deal. My literary agent, David Vigilano and Thomas Flannery, we sat down and we wrote this proposal, and the three of us walked into Penguin Ballantine Random House and Pamela Cannon in one day. We walked in on a Friday afternoon, and I was in a car on Saturday afternoon in October 2 years ago. And they said, they want to do your book and they want exclusive, they want to preempt all other proposals. I said, what are they asking? What are they giving? They said, a lot. I said, let's just go. No one else has it. I have to meet no one else. And it's been a rewarding thing. It prompted me, and I went to the meeting and said, I want to tell my story. I want to be truthful. And I didn't have to say specific things, and they said yes, and it's been a great ride.
Oh, that's so wonderful. It's just so authentic. And in it, you could just see your stories reflect such a deep love of culture and the history in both the American South and France. So what effect has the culture of the American South and France had on your career and your perspective?
Well, growing up in this Jim Crow South, when I grew up in the 50s and 60s in the Jim Crow South, I graduated from high school in 1966. And when I was a teenager finishing high school, it was just the beginnings of the civil rights movement. And I will never forget, in my modest, humble grandmother's house, my grandmother, the most important person in my life, I give credit to her and to thank God for her and her memory. We did many significant things together. We would sit and watch our humble little black and white television, and it would be things that really touched me. We watched the funeral of Martin Luther King on television. Mm-hmm. We watched the extraordinary funeral of the President John F. Kennedy Jr. We watched slowly how the whole world was turning on these very tragic and violent situations and extremities of killing men of peace. Dr. Martin Luther King was a man of peace, a Nobel Prize winner. To John F. Kennedy and his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, were the hope of the moment in the world for the USA. They were the youngest, I think he was the youngest president ever elected. And so everything turned around my life in my grandmother's home in the church. What really impacted my life in childhood is growing up in a missionary Baptist church with my family, and the traditions and rules and the very conservative values and lifestyle of people who went to church every single Sunday. Church going was the ritual of our lives. Church going, we went for the sermon, we went for our faith, but we also had a tradition, we dressed up. Church was the Sunday, my grandmother may have been a maid for 50 years at Duke University, but when she dressed up to go to church on Sunday, she and her sisters and my aunts and nieces, my cousins, I have no nieces, I'm sorry, my cousins, my grandmother's nieces, everyone in church was turned out as best they could be turned out. They saved and scrimped and saved their money to buy the best they could afford. These clothes were investment and their clothes were of quality. Easter, I remember my grandmother once had a navy blue silk duster coat, a swing coat. That coat was inspired by Paris. Little did I know at that point that coat was inspired by 1950s Dior and Givenchy. So in church, we learned how to be. We learned manners. As a child, we would learn to sit up straight in church. We learned poise by looking at our elders, looking at our uncles, looking at the males in pristine white shirts, polished shoes, neat suits, cut hair. And these things may sound superficial today. You know, you can go with hair looks like you lived in 15 years in a field and it's still okay. But these things mattered, and they mattered to me. We learned how to speak. We learned how to be polite. And I still go to church. I was just in church this morning virtually on Zoom at the Happy City in the Baptist Church in Harlem with Calvin O'Butts, the minister. I dedicated the book to him. And without church, I don't know where I would be. Without my grandmother's training, I don't know where I would be. Then suddenly, I discovered Vogue magazine, and I discovered going into the library and reading a book called The Fashionable Savages by John Fairchild, who became the czar, the emperor of fashion, because he had Women's Wear Daily. A magazine is no longer in publication, but it's online, I think, W. And this opened the world to me about France. He was a Francophile, and everything about France and Coco Chanel and Hubert de Givenchy and Balenciaga and Diana Vreeland. And I was reading and knew who Diana Vreeland was as a child before I ever met Diana Vreeland. I knew everything about Diana Vreeland because I read everything. There was a big, big spread in Life magazine once. An editor, she's dead, named Sally Kirkland, did a profile on Diana Vreeland, a 6-page profile with lavish black and white photographs. I took it and pinned it up on my wall in my room. The way Sasha has wallpaper that looks like the Beverly Hills Lounge, I wallpapered my room with pages from Life magazine and Vogue and the New York Times, pictures of Naomi Sims in Vogue, pictures of Pat Cleveland in Vogue, Halston's. Everything that I was coming across was papered, made wallpaper for my room with thumbtacks. And so this is how those two worlds intersected. And so when I was in high school, I was already running up and down the halls of Hillside High School, talking to my best friend, Ann Bibby, whom I really had a crush on. But I was afraid of her brother because he was a bully and he was a football player. So when I saw him coming, I'd run down the hall. Ann Bibby was the icon. Ann Bibby was the homecoming queen. She was dressed beautifully. Ann Bibby had her prom dress made by her mother, who was a nurse. Her prom dress was a dress from 𝐼𝐻 Givenchy, but it was a pattern, a Vogue pattern. And she bought the silk, the finest silk, and she made this beautiful prom dress. And in my first memoir, I discuss how Ann Bibby asked me at the prom in the gym. I was sitting on the edge of the, on the wall, and she came over and stopped dancing and said, "Would you come powder my back?" That was the first sexual experience I ever had. She had a high throat, like a Audrey Hepburn bateau, and it went deep down to her waist in the back. And she says, "Could you come powder my back? I'm sort of moist." She took out her powder part from her handbag and sort of had some powder on it, and I just gently patted her back. For me, that was better than going to the prom. I didn't go to the prom today. I was the star of the prom with Ann Bibby. And I used to run around the hall, and Ann Bibby, in my documentary, The Gospel According to Andre, said, well, he used to go around the hall talking about 𝐂𝐮 Guest. Who knew who 𝐂𝐮 Guest was? That was a woman in New York. And 𝐂𝐮 Guest used to go to the horses and the horse races, and she was a horsewoman. So this is what people my world, and I made my own world through books and reading and discovery. Vogue was my big National Geographic journey in the world through monthly doses of Vogue.
That's so wonderful, because I know so much of your career was also spent at Vogue.
Yes.
And it's wonderful that you were so impacted growing up by the literature that you were reading. And you said it's especially true of Brown students, but reading is just so formative in your trajectory in becoming who you are. And I know many of our audience members are so excited to have you on because you yourself are a Brunonian. So can you tell us about your experience at the forefront of the Brown-RISD partnership and how it shaped you?
Oh, it shaped me. Oh, when I left Durham, North Carolina to come to Brown, I came up on a train by myself with I didn't have trunks. I had big, huge cardboard boxes with my blankets, my antique quilts, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, it shaped me tremendously. I was liberated. I was liberated at Brown by my best friend, Dr. Janice A. Mays, who graduated with a PhD. We talk every day. We email each other every day. She's one of my dearest friends. And she and I and a friend named 𝐼𝐿𝐴 𝐶𝐭𝐫𝐴, we were close, and we went, our first trip together, we went on spring break to Paris.
Oh, wow.
And we took our money, and I had the scholarship, she had a scholarship. Yvonne's parents, I think Yvonne had a scholarship as well, but her parents, Yvonne's parents and Janice's parents were much more affluent than my background, and they had, extra money. So we went to Paris, and we got off the plane, we went to Paris on a bus, and Janice's wallet was stolen with her ID and all of that. When she got back to Brown, they'd taken all the money out of the wallet and put the wallet in the mail in her ID.
Yes.
But we went to Paris and we walked around and we thought we were just dope. We just walked around, but we were there on a mission. We were there to buy Yvonne's wedding trousseau because her father had given her money because she was going to marry her childhood sweetheart, her high school sweetheart, Rufus Cormier. And we went on a shopping spree and bought Yvonne, her father gave her the money, fabulous white ankle strap Charles Jourdain shoes, her white fabric embroidery anglaise, which was taken back to Texas and the dressmaker made her wedding dress. And one of the most spectacular things is I convinced Yvonne, let's go into André 𝐿𝐻𝐻. And in André 𝐿𝐻𝐻, we bought her going away suit, which was navy blue wool with white buttons. And that is what our trip was to spring break. We shared the same hotel. There were 2 twin beds. Janice and Yvonne slept in one, and I slept in the other. And the night before we would going back to Brown, I said, Janice, I have 50 francs. Can I borrow 50 francs from you and Yvonne? Because why? They thought, you want to go eat? I said, no, I've got to go to Club Set. Club Set was the big, fabulous gay discotheque. Before that was Studio 54, there was Club Set in Paris. And this is the fabulous place where it intersected the fashion world. Grace Jones used to be in Club Set, dancing, not in the 70s when I was at Brown, but she used to get up on the floor, on the tables and dance with no underwear on. There you'd meet Yves Saint Laurent, Karl Lagerfeld, all the fashion stars went to Club Set. It was a supper club. And downstairs in a tiny basement, they had a disco. And I remember in 1978 when I went to Club Set with my friend Betty Catrou, the muse of Yves Saint Laurent, and Yves Saint Laurent, and Diana Ross came to Paris and we had lunch with Diana Ross. And Diana Ross, we ate at Maxine, and later Diana Ross said, oh, I want to buy some antique jewelry to go to Club Set tonight. When we ran down the street and to a fabulous jewelry store, an antique jeweler, and they said, Diana says, oh, I want some diamond bracelets. And the lady said, of course, would you like these? And so Diana picked about 3 diamond bracelets. And then she said, could you send these to the Place Athénée? And this is big for a Black woman. This woman on a Saturday afternoon didn't ask for a credit card or any ID. This was respect given to Diana Ross. She was not thrown out of the store like Hermes where they threw Oprah out decades later because they didn't understand who Oprah was. The lady said, of course, we will send them to your hotel. No credit cards asked for, no line of credit. And then Diana Ross turned to me and Betty Catrou and said, would you all like a little something, a little bauble, a little bling? We said, no, I can take gifts. And Betty Catrou said, no, thank you. And we went off to Club Set and Diana Ross. Those are the memories I have of Paris, and they were great memories.
That is such an incredible story. And I remember reading that story about Diana Ross and being able to buy it without the line of credit. And it's incredible.
That was France. This is the importance of the racism and how it exists in certain racial profiling. You could walk into a store in those days in New York. Well, first of all, if a Black woman walked into Cartier buying diamonds, they might have the whole security staff come from out of the walls, like, locusts or something, walking around the store, following her, intimidating her. You know this famous story of Oprah went into Hermes just as it was closing, and they wouldn't open the store for her. They didn't recognize Oprah, and they didn't know that Oprah could buy anything in that store and triple it. And Oprah went on her show, and she didn't force them. They had to apologize. The president had to apologize for that kind of behavior. But it just goes to show you that in France, the woman recognized this was not an imposter, Diana Ross. I'll take you back a bit of history. Josephine Baker, the love child who became a world iconic personality. She went to Paris and she conquered the world. She couldn't have conquered the world just dancing in Harlem at the end of a chorus line. She became and conquered the world. She was dressed by all the great couturiers, Patou and Jean Dessay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she became a world iconic human being as a woman of color. And that is because she went to Paris. Now, take it to the modern moment. Black models often are advised, go to Paris or go to Europe and be apprentice or get training, and you can come back and you'll be a bigger star in New York. And that has happened with Pat Cleveland. Pat Cleveland, one of the greatest models ever in the 20th century. She went to Europe and she came back, and then, she became the muse for Halston. She was already the muse for Karl Lagerfeld, Yves Saint Laurent. This is what happens. The French people appreciate, they have there's a moment in literature in French called négritude, where they appreciate all the Black famous writers from Africa. So they understood way before America how to treat Blacks with equality.
That is such an important message. And more on that note, you've previously noted that in entering the fashion industry, you have to get through so many icebergs. It's very cruel and it can be very exciting. And I know you were one of the few Black people at Vogue for decades. So I'm wondering if those icebergs you refer to were even larger for you as a Black man.
Not necessarily. I was lucky to have to come on the scene at the time that I did. I was lucky to have had the mentor of Diana Vreeland, who was the trumpeter for my talent, who went and said to Andy Warhol personally, "You've got to have him at the factory for an interview." She wrote letters, I've been told, to the human resources at Vogue, the late Mary Campbell, the late Carrie Donovan, a fashion editor, also formerly of Vogue, a great fashion editor, and a friend of mine said, "Andre, you would never seen a letter the way I read the letter. I was at Vogue that Mrs. Vreeland wrote about you." And I said, "Well, can you give me a copy?" She says, "No, but you just don't understand. I have never seen Diana Vreeland write a letter like that." So I was introduced to the world through Diana Vreeland. Then I went on to Andy Warhol. Then I got to Women's Wear Daily. But it was a smaller world then. Fashion was a much smaller world. So I was this big, tall, string bean of a man, beanstalk of a person, coming from Brown with a master's degree. And they were just thrilled. And, you know, it wasn't the way I looked, and yet it was. But behind those tall, string bean, handsome looks, which are in my book, knowledge, I was smart. I opened my mouth. And I must say to all students, this is one of the things I must say to everyone at Brown who's listening to this today. The most important thing in your life that you must learn early on is listen and learn. Listen and learn. And there you will gain your confidence. Listen and learn. I think today's generation is much more confident because they've learned so many things earlier in life. You know, you've got internet, et cetera, et cetera. You're more exposed to knowledge. You listen and you learn, and it will take you anywhere. You must listen and learn and be observant. So when I was going into this world with Andy Warhol, they loved me because I would listen. And when I opened my mouth, I had something to say based on knowledge. So I was introduced to that world, and I became that star, that rising star in 1974 through 1978, because I presented the best credentials. I had knowledge. My power was my knowledge of fashion. I was well-mannered, well-groomed, and I had something to say. And I was original, and I had confidence. Brown gave me that confidence, and 𝐼𝐻𝐳 too, because when I was at Brown, I met the students at 𝐼𝐻𝐳, and the 𝐼𝐻𝐳 art students who had much more confidence than I could ever have. They gave me confidence just being artistic. They dressed a certain way, they walked a certain way, they talked a certain way, and that's what I think is important about having a university or higher degree environment to learn and to become yourself and to gain confidence and poise and to learn on your own through reading.
I remember you opened the book with this brilliant metaphor about style and knowledge, and you say style gets you up the stairs, but knowledge gets you through the door, and it's just natural.
But that is a quote that I borrowed from Mr. Truman Capote, one of the great writers of our time, of the 20th century, yeah.
So wonderful.
One of my favorite writers, yes. He was also Southern, you know.
Yes. So
Southern and gay.
Mm-hmm.
He was gay and Southern. His life was similar to mine. He had his Aunt Sook as his best friend, and my grandmother was my best friend. And Mr. Capote lived with his Aunt Sook, and A Christmas Memory is based on his childhood memories of Aunt Sook. And they are touching. And every Christmas, or the Christmas season, I would watch that black and white special on TV with Geraldine Page, and my grandmother and I would sit and look at that. And then that would become the season, and my grandmother would go and make fruitcakes starting in Thanksgiving, and they would be put away until Christmas and put on the cheesecloth with sliced apples and a little bit of bourbon to keep moist.
That is such an incredible memory. So shifting gears a little bit, for decades, you were the only Black person on the mythical front row of fashion shows, but it seems like things have started to shift a little bit with the appointments of Samira Nasser as the first Black editor-in-chief at the venerable Harper's Bazaar, and of course, Edward Enninful, the celebrated Black editor-in-chief at British Vogue. What do you make of these appointments, and how has new fashion media addressed diversity and racial inequality in their pages?
These powerful new appointments are groundbreaking, and they will determine the future of fashion at the international and global level of excellence. First, we would start with Sir Edward Enninful. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II before he became editor-in-chief of British Vogue. He's been there 3 years. Edward is the man that is the future of fashion. He recently, just this week, landed on the cover of Time magazine. Okay. And Time magazine says he is the most important man in the world of fashion globally. You may say in this talk, I am the most influential man, and I am very appreciative of that. But I think we got to change it to the one of the influential people living today. Edward has done such mainstream breakout movements. He got an award because he had the Duchess of Sussex be a guest editor, you know, the Black bride of Princess Diana's son. He got an award for that. He recently did something that no one ever thought of doing at Vogue, and it took Edward, a man from Ghana who moved to England early in his youth. He's only like 58 or 59 or 56, I'm trying to age him. But maybe he's younger than that, maybe he's 56. He put on the cover of British Vogue the first ever 85-year-old cover subject, Dame Judi Dench. She was 80-something in a pink. And this is because beauty is wonderful at any age. So it just crashed with that whole thing of ageism. And it took Edward Enninful to do that because he is enlightened, he is well-read, he is exposed, he is confident. And so I learned about Edward's appointment early one morning through an email from a best friend of a mutual best friend. And she said, I'm just going to share you the news. It's about 6 o'clock in the morning. Edward's been appointed, you know, editor-in-chief of British Vogue. I immediately emailed him, and this I will always say, he sent me back the most wonderful email. He said, thank you, Andre. You paved the way for me. And he continues to say that to this day, 3 years later. Now, 𝐼𝐸. 𝐼𝐸 was Grace Coddington's assistant at Vogue. And she, I don't know how she got into that because very rarely were there Black girls assistants at Vogue. And 𝐼𝐸 was Grace Coddington's assistant. And I walked by Grace's office when she got there in her early days. And I said, tell me now, how do I exactly pronounce your name? I want to get it right. And recently when I emailed her to congratulate her about her appointment, she said, I will never forget how you made me feel when you walked by my office and asked, how did I pronounce my name? You wanted to get it right. It made me feel at home. In that cold, glacial, cruel, backbiting, devil wears Prada atmosphere of competition, she said I made her feel at home. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of 𝐼𝐸.
That's wonderful.
Go ahead.
Yes, as I was going to say, it's wonderful that you are able to use your visibility to promote and accelerate and amplify the voices of other Black creatives.
Well, I'll tell you, recently I had a memory, and I've always done that without having a bullhorn. I wasn't out on the front line screaming, Black power, Black is right. You know, I was always very quiet and nuanced. But recently, a memory came up to me last Sunday, and I had buried it in my recesses of my mind. But I'll share this with you, with Brown. So there was a time for me to do my column, Life with Andre, or Style Facts, and I always had to present my ideas, you know, in one words or 2 words on, you know, a memo to Miss Winter. And one time, like maybe December before we would go start to get the stories together for the February issue of Black History Month, I had perhaps proposed too many stories on Blackness or Black designers or Black culture. And this memory came up and it was hurtful, and it was part of Miss Winter had made this statement about, due to my intolerant and hurtful behavior, we have to make changes in Vogue because we have ignored diversity for so long. She made that statement, but this way goes way back, and I can't remember the year or specifics what was on that thing, but I remember the moment when she said, this is not going to be a column. We are not doing columns about Black History Month.
Wow.
And I went silent, and I had buried that moment, and I hadn't even put it in my memoir in Chiffon Trenches. But I'll tell you, Chiffon Trenches is coming out in paperback, by the way, but still go buy the hardcover at the bookstore at Brown. Well, I don't know when the paperback issue is coming out, but I did put that in the forward of the new paperback issue.
It's incredible that you share that anecdote about your column that you wanted to launch at Vogue. And the timing of your book was remarkably propitious, being released in just May when protests against racism and police violence took off in the US, adding the fuel to the fire and circling many companies, including Vogue's owner, Condé Nast. So how have you and your memoir helped move that needle at Condé Nast?
I don't know if my memoirs helped move anything. I would not take credit for anything at Condé Nast. I don't think I would reflect anything at Condé Nast anymore, but I do think that Edward Innefeld, Samir's appointment really probably helped move the needle, because now at Condé Nast there is a floodgate opened of awareness of diversity. There is Vanity Fair with the cover of Breonna Taylor. That was amazing. There was Vanity Fair where they hired Dario Calmez, who did the first, he was a photographer, artist, who did the first Black cover, photographed it, of Viola Davis, which was inspired by photographs from the 19th century of slaves who had been tortured by their masters. I realized that Glamour magazine had an issue in the September issue about Black hair. And, you know, so suddenly there is Blackness or Blackitude, or negritude, it's Blackitude, all over Condé Nast. And I don't read Vogue anymore, because I was given a notice about 4 weeks ago that my name was going to be removed from the masthead as a contributing editor, but I was given the announcement as an official one, but other people who had been on the masthead as contributing editors were going to be erased from there because they were going to a new format where people who contributed across the formats, digital and editorial, they were going to make more room for them. So I had to accept that, and I did accept that as an official business decision. But I don't think that anything I could do would ever influence them, maybe quietly or indirectly. But I do think what Edward Innefeld does has affected what Vogue has done in the future. Because you need a person of color to be able to generate the correct response to these issues. Black Lives Matter. Apparently Edward's, and I begged him to send me the September issue of British Vogue. His British Vogue cover for September, the back to school issue, was a man on the cover and I think a Black model, and the subject of the cover was activism, Black activism. He makes normal the marginalization of Black culture in a fashion magazine.
Incredible. I know you talked about a photo shoot that you did that was inspired by Gone with the Wind. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Graydon Carter, I asked him, I called him up from Paris. I said, Graydon, and I had this idea long before Miss Randall's little literary book about The Wind Done Gone. I did that way before she did. I didn't do it 5 years, but I don't know if she was inspired by me, but I had this sudden moment and I thought, these beautiful clothes from John Galliano, these extraordinary dresses with trains 20 feet long, his first collection at Givenchy Couture, his first ever. He was very young. And suddenly I thought, these clothes are very, very, very Scarlett O'Hara, you know? And so, although his collection was inspired by The Princess and the Pea, it was a different muse. And I called up Graydon Carter and I said, Graydon, I want to do a photo essay with Karl Lagerfeld based on Gone with the Wind, where the house and the aristocrats, Scarlett O'Hara and Red Butler, are Black people. Naomi Campbell will be Scarlett O'Hara. And designers and models will be the people who were considered slaves, the enslaved people of servitude. John Galliano was a housemaid. The late Jean-Franco Ferré, who was a man of great girth, was Hattie McDaniels. Naomi was Scarlett, running up and down the steps, screaming and, you know, being a diva. And we had Amber Valletta as a soldier from the North. That didn't run. We had Manolo Blahnik as the gardener with no shoes on, bare feet, and he was photographed as the gardener. And this was one of the it was an apex moment in my career, because this was totally understood by Graydon Carter, who's just had me do airmail, to be a contributor to airmail. My first piece was last Friday, or yesterday. And it was critically acclaimed, and it was critically acclaimed by the late Amy Spindler of the New York Times Magazine. She wrote a critical analysis of this, of how groundbreaking it was. It is one of my favorite things. And I think the Red Butler was a Black model named Tyson Beckford. I think it was Tyson Beckford. Yes, I'm sure it was. And so this was a wonderful shoot over 3 days. It was just extraordinary. And we had so much fun. And we had horses brought into the courtyard of Karl Lagerfeld. We had backdrops like a movie, making out of doors, but it was indoor lighting. It was just extraordinary.
That is incredible. So switching gears a little bit, when you were working with Fab's president, Sasha, to come up with the title of this talk, you specifically asked to have the word love included. Can you tell us why that was important to you?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, Sydney. I wanted love included because my book, Chiffon Trenches, is an epistle of love. No matter what I have gone through, difficulties, highs and lows at Vogue, and no matter what, there are great descriptions of Karl Lagerfeld and our friendship of over 3 decades that suddenly sort of went down the rabbit hole. This was a book about my love and respect, and I give so much, I owe so much to Karl Lagerfeld as a mentor, one of the greatest readers of our times. He would stop by the bookstore every day from work. He always had books. He must have had, I don't know how many books, millions and millions of books. I mean, there were walls and walls. He had shopping bags full of books every day. And one of the greatest gifts about Karl was that he would send his friends books that he wanted them to read. So when I first met Karl in 1975, he is the person that gave me the privilege and the luxury to become almost an expert on 18th century France by sending me books, the great books of Nancy Mitford on the Sun King, the great books of Nancy Mitford on Madame de Pompadour, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Frederick the Great. So there again is the quality and the investment of reading. Did I answer that question? I think I went off the rails.
I think you really are driving home your love of reading and love of knowledge too.
Okay, so my epistle of love, it's everything in this book is about love. I did not want this book to be a revenge or salacious, tell-all, nasty, bitchy, queenie book about things that have happened to me. I did have some terrible things happen to me, and I'm emotionally scarred by my departure from Vogue. And I have had a great break with Anna Wintour. I have not heard from since February of this year, and nor do I intend to hear from her because she was the first woman to have the galley of my book. We made a galley for her. Pam Cannon, the editor of my book, said you got to give her the galley first. She cannot see a book or hear about it without you having given it to her. I gave it to her, and I said, please feel free to remove anything from the galley you think that's not appropriate. She read the book. She called me up on the phone at 4 o'clock one afternoon, and we had a conversation. And she said, I think your book is very compelling, and I would not like any of my references to my children taken away. And I don't want any references about my ex-boyfriend of whom I'm no longer with. And I took it all out. Because at that point, I thought she would support my book because she had been very supportive of my first book, a memoir in 2004, ALT, a memoir. She had been very supportive of this. I'd gotten a CFDA, a Eugenia Shepherd Award for that book. She also gave me a black tie dinner party with 20 guests at the Metropolitan Museum of Art because she was such a contributor on a Monday evening where we all strolled up the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And, you know, women in Chanel couture, Lord and Lady Black, the pastor of my church, the Reverend Calvin O'Bus III, my best friend Alexis Thomas, her 2 sons. We had to go to Prada and get them black tie suits. They were borrowed from Prada. We bought a dress to have my best friend Alexis Thomas, a Donna Karan couture dress. And there was Anna Wintour Chanel and Annette de la Renta, Oscar de la Renta, Amika Ertegun and Ahmed Ertegun, a great, great decorated icon in splendid Oscar de la Renta. So I thought she'd be supportive. And then after that, never heard from her again.
So you mentioned you haven't heard from Anna since February, but what do you make of her apology on behalf of Vogue where she admits that Vogue has not found enough ways to elevate and give space to Black creatives?
I think her apology was a corporate decision to do. This lady never had to apologize to anyone, the great Diana Vreeland. And I styled this picture in the 70s with Jonathan Becker. This is her best Madame Grey evening dress with her best red shoes by Dalco. We did this on a Saturday afternoon. Working with Diana Vreeland on this shoot for W is like an afternoon of joy. She never had to apologize to anyone for hurting anybody. And I think that Anna's decision to make that decision, I hope she lives up to it. I think it was a corporate decision. It was the right one. Things will change. But as I said, and I have been quoted, I call her Dame, a colonial Dame, because she is born in England. Her mother is American, her father is British. She comes from an English caste system of, status. You have the royals, you have the aristocrats, you have the working class, and she is a woman of privilege, a white woman of privilege, and she will never let anyone or anything get in the way of white privilege.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be very interesting to see how these corporations live up to these promises that they're now suddenly making.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you, Sydney. And I'm telling you, there's going to be a big reckoning in the world because of this whole thing with George Floyd's death, where we actually saw technical live lynching. Lynching, in other words, not by ropes and trees, but by knees on the neck of a man. By the numerous martyrs, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and they've gone on and on. We go all the way back to Trayvon Martin. That was a lynching by a gun, and the man was acquitted and gone. He walks the earth. And Black Lives Matter is a very important moment in our history in America, because America has a bill to play. As James Baldwin says, we've got a bill to pay, and it's got to be paid. And somehow change has got to come.
Yes, and it's scary as these days pass. I know a couple months ago, we celebrated the 50-year passing of Emmett Till's death.
Yes, 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 yes. A 4-year-old teenager.
It's terrible. And I know during an interview with Sandra Bernhard in June of this year, you said that you thought things would not go back to the way they used to be after the Black Lives Matter protests this year. Are you still feeling encouraged?
I'm feeling very encouraged by people who are very positive. I'm feeling very encouraged by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I'm feeling very encouraged, although I think it's very turbulent sometimes. I feel very encouraged that there are activists out there who want to keep hope alive. Hope alive. We cannot give up the dream that things will change eventually. For this has to be, it's been too long. 401 years, it's just been too long.
Yes, certainly. So switching gears a little bit, we did receive an overwhelming amount of questions from you from our audience. And this question comes from Kimberly Jacquet, who's from New Orleans, and she wants to know, do you believe that fashion has embraced Black designers as openly as it has embraced Black culture?
No. Kimberly, is her name Kimberly? Yeah.
Kimberly, yes.
Kimberly, no. To answer your question, no. Black designers have not been embraced the way people have embraced white designers. There are very few Black known designers who received notice. The only one I can think of is Stephen Burroughs, who had, perfume deals and was recognized in the 70s. He was right up there with Halston. He went to Versailles. They had this Battle of Versailles, 5 American designers next to 5 French designers. And Stephen Burroughs represented the African-American world because his models were the best. Pat Cleveland, Beth Ann Hardison, Alva Cheen, Billy Blair. They were also the great favorite models of people like Halston and Oscar de la Renta. No, there is a woman, and I always forget her name when I want to talk about her because she's so pivotal to the history of fashion in America. She came up from the South. She may have even been from New Orleans. And her grandmother taught her to sew, and she made Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress in 1952. She was making wedding clothes and couture dresses for the elite, affluent society women of America. And Jackie Kennedy could have had any dress in the world, and she went to this lady. Her name escapes me. Someone please send us in the name of the woman who designed Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. It escapes me. I should write it down so I will remember it. And this woman is represented in museums. I've seen her wedding dresses and her evening gowns, and they were parallel to the best French couture. But this woman goes basically unsung. There's never been a great book written about her. Someone has got to do a book or do a video or something about this woman. Before the end, someone will please send her name. And no, they have not been recognized.
Hopefully we're going to see that coming soon because these corporations are delivering those promises. So we've also received a question from everyone's favorite literary arts professor, the poet Andrew Coloroso. He says, I'm so grateful for your optimism and hopefulness. It's genuinely inspiring. If you feel comfortable, would you tell us how you've managed to overcome experiences of delusionment in the very tricky and contentious world of high fashion?
This is a very extraordinary question. I thank you. I have managed to overcome every formidable woe in my life based on my faith. I'm going through something right now, and I went to church this morning, and Matthew 11, chapter 11:30, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. That was almost directed to me. I feel that although I'm smiling with you, I have a personal challenge. I'm not sick or I'm not got the COVID, but something very personal in my life I'm going through that I do not wish to share. It's very personal and private. But to get through that, faith takes me through everything. If I constantly say my prayer, my meditation, my concentration, and my focus, as is with tennis, with Serena Williams. You focus, you're disciplined, you have to focus. And I love that woman on this tennis court the other night, Slovenian 𝐼𝐬𝐧, she sat down and she just closed her eyes to channel her energy to positive thinking, to blot out the things that were going on around her when Serena had to sit down and have her ankle rebandaged. That was a very wonderful testament to the way you can get through life. You sit down, you calm, you breathe. As my friend Abba Kwahu says to me from Africa, breathe. I breathe and I meditate and I pray.
That's so wonderful. And I'm sure having a community of people that are there to support you is also a wonderful way of getting through.
Absolutely. Well, this is supporting me just by the fact that Brown, the fashion, Sasha's having this wonderful Zoom talk. This is supportive of me, and I thank you for that. Thank you. I'm very grateful.
So since few people in the world know as much about fashion as you, before we sign off, I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's top style icons. I know that Diana Vreeland and Anna Wintour used to be amongst your top fashion icons. Who are they today?
Rihanna. Rihanna for Fenty Beauty, because she makes $600 million or $700 million a year. Rihanna, top style. Not only for her talent, but for what she does with Fenty Beauty and her clothing line. I think Rihanna is my favorite style icon. Her choices are always right. Her choices for the Met Ball were always correct. When she came up those steps in that mustard yellow cape, edged in fur, with about 10 train bearers dressed in black tie, I called it the Black Frozen moment. This was the aspiration of all people who want to go to the Met Ball. This was the moment of perfection when she slowly unfurled that huge cape. It was like a scene out of a black and white movie from the 30s. It was almost like an Adrian-esque moment. Adrian, the designer for great costumes. It was a cape. It was a moment. I would say Rihanna.
That's wonderful. I also know that you happen to be a fan, and you mentioned this before, of the style of Melania Trump. So in a climate where Americans seem so polarized politically, what are your thoughts on wearing a designer who has very different political views from you?
I think it's okay. It's fine. I think that she represents a certain kind of position in life, and her choices are correct most of the time. I didn't get the military Fidel Castro-esque Alexander McQueen suit for her speech in the Rose Garden, but her best was when she was in the pale blue that had been inspired by a Jackie O suit for the inaugural, with pale blue gloves and pale blue stilettos. Her hair up in a twist.
That's incredible. And also, Andre, I know that you wanted to know who the Black 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐿 who designed Jackie Kennedy's iconic wedding dress in, and we just got it in that it's Ann Lowe.
Ann Lowe, thank God. Who sent that in?
My father, actually. He's watching this talk.
Your father? Ask him how he found it out. Ann Lowe. Oh, I'm so impressed with your father. What does your father do? What does your father do? He's a fashion icon? What does he do?
He wishes he is. He's styling those T-shirts, and he's trying to make it a trend.
Ask him how he found out Ann Lowe, and email Sasha or email me, please. I'm curious. Because for a black man to know, not a black man, what is your father, your ethnicity?
He is white. He's French.
He's French. Oh, okay. Well, that's even better. A Frenchman would know that. A Frenchman would know that Jackie Kennedy's wedding gown was designed by Ann Lowe. It's quite beautiful, too. And I didn't know that when, I was growing up. I only knew Jackie Kennedy wore clothes by Givenchy or clothes inspired by France from Ole Cassini. But when I learned that Ann Lowe, a black woman, had designed her dress, I did my research and homework. That's another tip I give to all you brown students. Do your homework. And when you go into the FIT lab, FIT archives, where they keep the clothes ventilated, they're restored in climate control rooms, and you can't touch the clothes except you put on gloves, and you have to be supervised by a supervisor. And there were Ann Lowe wedding dresses and Ann Lowe black velvet evening gowns that were like Charles James, the American couturier. And bravo to your father for letting me help me with that. Thank you.
He'll be so excited to hear that. So we have another question coming in from a high school student from Germany, Nora Josharaj, and she asks, how has the current pandemic affected the fashion industry, and what do you think the long-term effects of it will look like, especially considering people who are new to the industry?
I think it's very difficult for the fashion industry. Very, very difficult. I find it's extremely difficult. Nobody wants to shop. You see so many stores closed on Madison Avenue. Everyone's got sales on everything. Dionne Van Furstenberg closed most of her stores around the world, and she also has a nuclear store. Sales online, everything's on sale, and it's difficult. You know, Neiman Marcus has gone bankrupt. They just opened in Hudson Yards in New York last year, and now the store is empty, and people are buying $3,000 dresses for $150. A friend of mine bought a skirt that was $1,400 last Saturday, yesterday, and she bought it for $100.
Wow.
It's 100% markdown. They're giving away the clothes. Neiman Marcus in Florida, also a friend. They were giving away Victoria Beckham clothes, Actress, all the labels. And, you know, people are very, very concerned today with survival. People are focused on, ordering in the things that are essential for your home, Clorox wipes, masks. People are concerned about how to get their food, takeaways, drive-thrus, Grubhub, all of that, Uber Eats. And people are not concerned with shopping so much. But I do find that there are some people who go downtown to the Louis Vuitton store, Balenciaga store, and manage to find things that they like. And I saw a young Asian girl, walking down the street with a Balenciaga bag. And I was sitting outside in a restaurant, the Mercer Hotel, and I just stopped her and I said, "Oh, what did you buy at Balenciaga? I'm curious." And she said, "Oh, I'll show you." And she pulled out a green crocodile bag that was on sale for $1,900. So there is fashion there for people who really want it. But I think people are really sheltered in. And the only new thing I have bought this year was an avocado mattress, which is extraordinary. That was my great luxury. Avocado mattress. And I went to Hoboken, New Jersey and ordered it. And it's been the investment buy of my life. Now, that was not to wear. It's to sleep on, and I love it.
That's incredible. And I know you said it, a lot of people are putting their items on sale because there isn't much of like a market for it right now.
And visually, designers are going to have to figure out how they present their collections. Tom Ford just told me exclusively for Airmail that he was going to put his collection on his website, his men's and women's website, on the 17th, which is about 4 days from now. That was the day he was slotted to have a show, but he is not having a show. You're going to have to go to the website and look at the new collection, and then he'll just sell it. He'll buy his own collection for his stores, and for the VIP or celebrity consumers, they will have virtual meetings to sell the clothes. And that's a new way of doing it.
It's so interesting. I can't wait to see how that comes to the forefront.
Yeah.
So Andre, what do you think of new Black American designers coming up like Telfar, Laquan Smith, Christopher John Rogers, and even Kanye West?
I think Laquan Smith is a great designer. I know that Laquan Smith, I mentored him. Laquan Smith, I mentored him because he grew up in his grandmother's apartment making patterns for newspapers. I had to see who this designer was. I had Serena Williams walking his show one year. She was in town for the US Open. I said, "Serena, come here. You're going to walk in a fashion show. Do it for me." Common was there in the room in a hotel. And Serena put on a dress. She didn't have a finish. She just came. She said, "Okay, I'll do it. It's fun." And that was in my column in Vogue. It got in the column in Vogue. And Laquan, I gave him $2,000 of my own money, hard-earned money, which I could have given to my church. And I said, "Laquan, you're going to take this money and go to Paris, buy a ticket to Paris. And I'm not going to tell you what to do in Paris. Just by going to Paris, walking down the street, having a cup of hot chocolate and Angelina, looking at the way the sun hits the biscuit stone at the Louvre, it's going to impress you. Something in Paris is going to impress you. It could be a croissant, it could be a hot dog, or it could be someone's shoes, but you must go to Paris." I sent him to Paris on his first trip. Now he has a burgeoning business. He has a studio in Queens. He has many, many clients. He has clients in Dubai, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a struggle for him, but he had a collection last time before the pandemic. I never go to his collections because they're at night. He always has them at 9 o'clock at night. I am not about to be tramping out of my house at 9 o'clock at night for anybody for fashion no more, unless it's Tom Ford, okay? Or Ralph Lauren, or maybe Marc Jacobs. But no, I'm not running down to some defunct factory or some old building for a show at 9 o'clock. It's called for 9. It might start at 9:30 and it's over at 9:40, and I got to struggle to get home. So I do go see Laquan. I do go preview his collections, and I think he's a great talent. And I think there's talent. There are talents of people. And as for Mr. West, let's pray for him. I pray for him.
That we shall. So there, as you said, there's definitely a wealth of Black talent at the forefront, but we also have a bit of an issue within the industry of cultural appropriation. So how do you suggest we combat cultural appropriation in fashion?
It's been brilliantly handled by the firm of Gucci, brilliantly. When Alessandro Michele just did that funky mask after a gollywag, he didn't understand. And Gucci was the first to create an advisory board of very important people to advise them and to have think tanks and seminars and sessions about cultural reappropriation and how to do it correctly. And that board it includes people like Beth Ann Hardison. It also includes the great, oh God, where's my head today? What's her name? Simone Saunders is working on the Biden campaign. And these people, Naomi Campbell, of course, and they are paid for by Gucci to fly to the collections. They go to see the collections in Milan, I guess before the pandemic. And they had a beautiful, beautiful luncheon with about 140 of the most influential people of color, including the editor-in-chief of Essence magazine, the current editor, just a week before the last Met Ball season when the show was Notes on Camp. And that was a luncheon held the Friday before. And they just got up, and Dapper Dan, they have collaborated with Dapper Dan. So they set the template. And of course, Mutual Prada also has done a great job because she has Ava DuVernay, a woman who came up through the ranks and became a great director and filmmaker. I remember Ava DuVernay being the minder for Jennifer Hudson when Jennifer Hudson was the breakout star of Dreamgirls. And now she's a great, great film director.
Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. And I know you are like an avid fan of Jennifer Hudson based on her performance in Dreamgirls, and you advocated for her to have that cover.
And she got that cover.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
So shifting gears a little bit, what are your thoughts on sustainability and ethics in fashion? And do you think that iconic brands will follow in Chanel's footsteps and no longer use fur or exotics in their collections?
Well, you know, Alessandro Michele stopped doing fur. And, you know, there's a sustainability editor at Vogue named Tony Goodman, sustainability. And I'm sure she makes it aware that, you know, there are certain things you can't do. My avocado mattress is a mattress of sustainability. It is #1 in the world of mattress buying because it's made from cotton. It's got no chemicals. It's got no, you know, toxic formaldehydes or something. So you've got to be aware of things. You've got to be aware of cotton. And I think that people are more and more informed about these issues. And, you know, God forbid, every aspect of life, people must be concerned. I mean, the wildfires are just out of control in California and in Oregon and places like that. And we have been talking about climate control for decades. And people are now saying, look, this is going to be a pattern, the way California is, get ready for America in 10 or 20 years, you know? Mm-hmm. So sustainability has its place in everything in life, everything. We must recycle. I'm very concerned. I must put the bottles in the recyclable bottle and et cetera, et cetera. We cannot put our imprint on the earth. We cannot. We got to be very aware of how we do that.
Most definitely. And I think you said it perfectly about conscious consumerism, but unfortunately, conscious consumerism can only get us so far. So what do you think the biggest step that the fashion industry at all price points can take to address climate change and reduce its carbon?
Having programs or having initiatives that tell people how they're going about being conscious of sustainability, either through their products or labels or programs, you know, websites. Everyone can be informed. You can only be as informed as you can read something or learn about something and know that this is a product of sustainability. I would not have been as intrigued by Avocado Mattress Company had I not been looking up avocado online, how to cut an avocado properly. And I came across Avocado Mattress Company. I thought, oh, what is it? But the Avocado Mattress Company is full of young people. It's all young. It was started by a couple in Hoboken, New Jersey, who got kids. They came up with this sustainable mattress with cotton that was picked in India, you know, plucked in India. And all the people who work in the store, well, there's only one store in Hoboken and it's made in California. They moved to California to manufacture these mattresses. And so it's a whole program of sustainability. They're #1 in the sustainability. And also the mattress is cotton, so it breathes. It's not made in some hideous Chinese factory.
Definitely. So you said that it's important for students who are entering the fashion industry to read up and be knowledgeable, but what 3 books would you also suggest that students of design read before they graduate?
Oh, you mean in general?
Yes, in general. It also could be on the topic of sustainability if you wish.
I would say in general, 3 books that are important to read are Frederick Douglass, The Narrative of a Slave, a very important book. There are 3 different versions of it. The Narrative of a Slave. It's one of the greatest books that you could ever read. Or the biography of Frederick Douglass. Or I would say also on another level, you should read the extraordinary, wonderful, great book, a big biography that came out on Mr. Andy Warhol recently this summer called by Adam Goldbeek. It's about 900 pages. A book on the arts, a book on a man that made a difference. He was the greatest orator, Frederick Douglass. He was one of the greatest men in the history of this country. And a third book, well, you might want to read Andy Warhol Diaries because that's really fun. That's, if you can find a copy of it, that's really fun. Very fun, racy, raunchy. Woo! Or even Bob Colacello's book, Holy Terror, which was, and he worked for Andy Warhol. He was the editor-in-chief. He was my boss in the interview. Holy Terror is a definitive biography on the world of Andy Warhol. Takes you through the decades. And the other book that I would suggest that should be read by Brown students that gives you a sweeping overview of what the world should be is, let me think. Let me pick up my books here. What am I? I'm sitting, I'm not at my book. My books are all over my house. But I'm not.
Bibliophile.
Huh?
I said, you're such a bibliophile.
But, what is the greatest books? Okay. Any book, I'm picking up one. Anything that is by James Baldwin. This is a compilation of words and quotations from James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, and you can read that book. This is my personal reading list, and I would share it with all of you.
Well, our audience better go check those out. So we have our final audience question coming in, and the question is, in any ideal world, is everyone a designer? And this question is actually coming in from our head of fab design team, 𝐶𝐵𝐴𝐻.
Okay, Mr. Imonim or 𝐶𝐵𝐴𝐻, a woman or man? Is it a woman?
𝐶𝐵𝐴𝐻.
Well, is she a man or woman?
He's a man.
Well, Mr. Imonim, it's Mr. 𝐶𝐵𝐴𝐻. No, the ideal world is not a world where everyone is a designer. No, absolutely not. No, the ideal world is a world where people make choices by their own individuality and their own lifestyle and essentials and demands. No, not everyone is born or should be a designer or should aspire to be a designer. People always say to me, you could be a designer. I never wanted to be a designer. Andy Warhol said, oh, Andre, you could be a designer. You could be so famous and rich. No, you don't want to be a designer. You don't be an interior decorator. But if you have an artistic bent, the way Sasha does to get that wallpaper in her dormitory room, might become an interior decorator, but she could be anything she wants. You can be anything you want as long as you have confidence and you have knowledge and you want to pursue a certain dream. What are you studying?
I'm studying international and public affairs.
And you're planning to go to law school, so that's an important role. You don't want to be a designer. Who has time to design things? I mean, designing is a very tough thing. There are certain people who are gifted, and I think those who have chosen design who've been successful, Marc Jacobs, Miuccia Prada, Tom Ford, Ralph Lauren, Carolina Herrera, Oscar de la Renta, they may have fallen into it, but they were successful. Norma Kamali is a great American designer. Norma Kamali, she started out as an airlines employee, and then she became a designer, and she is self-taught, and the clothes are exceptional. Go online for Norma Kamali. They are affordable by Brown students. We're not talking about thousands of dollars here. You can get something for like $300, $200. Go online. It's vintage too. Norma Kamali vintage.
What an interesting recommendation. So I know you said not everybody's going to be able to be a designer, even in an ideal world, but do you have any last advice for BIPOC creatives at Brown and RISD listening to this interview who want to navigate their way into this difficult industry?
My only advice to anyone in the world of Brown RISD is be yourself. Be the best you can be and just be confident. You have expressed total confidence. Are you a senior or junior?
I'm a junior.
Your confidence, and Brown students often lead with great confidence. Somehow Brown gives the students confidence, and you feel comfortable talking to me. Sasha, confidence, and all the Brown students I met in the fashion group, confidence and poise. Just read informed. Knowledge is power, and you can do anything you want. Whatever your desire is, you can pursue it in the world through your confidence, your poise, and the faith in yourself.
That is such incredible advice, Andre.
All right, thank you.
So your words are resonant with not only Brown and RISD students watching, but aspiring changemakers everywhere. And
thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm happy to do this. I'm so happy. And you're such a wonderful moderator. Your questions are wonderful. And you've done it with such poise and skill and confidence, and you show no sign of nervousness, and that's great. I mean, in the world, that's what you must overcome, is a sense of shyness. You must feel liberated enough to confront anybody in a conversation, and you will go far. And Sasha, same to you. And most of the people I've met at Brown are like that. When I was at Brown for the documentary debut, I met so many wonderful people, and they came to the Fierce Ball. Brown gives you the confidence to be.
Yes. You said that in such an empowering, incredible way. So I want to give a huge thank you to our audience for tuning in and taking the time to listen. And of course, thank you so much, Andre, for sharing your experiences and thoughts with us in such an inspiring way. Fab is so grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Fab. I'm really honored and humbled. Thank you for this wonderful Sunday afternoon. I so much appreciate it.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that's about it for now, but hopefully we will talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye for now.